Right now, as you listen to these words, a silent and irreversible chain reaction is moving across the American landscape. For the past 18 months, the headlines have been dominated by the crisis in Florida. We have seen the images of salt water bubbling up through the streets of Miami, the stories of insurance premiums reaching $20,000 a year, and the heartbreaking collapse of the condo market. But the biggest mistake any investor or homeowner can make right now is believing that this is a Florida problem. What we are witnessing is the beginning of a systemic realignment of the American housing market. The Florida aquifer was simply the first domino to fall. The contagion is now crossing state lines, moving into the desert of Arizona, the suburbs of Texas, and the mountain towns of Idaho. We are entering the era of the effect domino, a period between 2026 and 2035, where the geographic maps of wealth in this country will be completely redrawn. If you own property in the Sun Belt, or if you are planning to move your life and your savings to these regions, you need to understand that the foundation of the American dream is being fundamentally repriced. To understand the speed at which these dominoes are falling, we have to look back at the Great Migration of 2020 through 2024. During that period, roughly 9 million Americans relocated, fleeing high taxes and small apartments in the North for the promise of the South and the West. This migration was fueled by a single powerful narrative, that you could have more for less. Developers in Texas, Arizona, and Florida built hundreds of thousands of homes based on the assumption that this growth was permanent and that the resources supporting it were infinite. But as we enter 2026, that narrative has hit a wall of cold, hard physical reality. The carrying cost of a home, which includes taxes, insurance, utilities, and maintenance, has spiked by an average of 45% nationwide in just 3 years. In the fastest-growing markets, that spike is even higher. This is the first stage of the domino effect, the death of affordability in the very places that were supposed to be affordable. The second domino is falling right now in the state of Texas, and it is a fiscal catastrophe that is catching millions of new residents by surprise. Texas has always marketed itself as the land of freedom and low costs, primarily because it has no state income tax. But what the brochures do not tell you is that the state must fund its massive infrastructure somehow. That burden falls almost entirely on property owners. During the boom, as home prices in Austin, Dallas, and Houston doubled, the tax assessments followed. Today, in 2026, families who moved to Texas to save money are finding that their property tax bills are now larger than the state income tax they were trying to avoid in California or New York. In some central Texas counties, property taxes have reached an effective rate of nearly 3% of the home's value every single year. When you add a rising property tax to an insurance market that is skyrocketing due to hailstorms and grid instability, the miracle of Texas real estate begins to look like a trap. Austin, which was the fastest-growing city in America just 3 years ago, is now seeing the sharpest decline in home prices of any major metropolitan area. This is not a temporary dip. It is a permanent repricing of the cost of living in the Lone Star State. Let us dig deeper into the Texas energy crisis, which is a hidden domino often ignored by real estate agents. The Texas power grid, managed by ERCOT, has become one of the most significant liabilities for homeowners. In 2025, we saw record-high temperatures that pushed the grid to the brink of failure for 60 consecutive days. For a homeowner, this translates to skyrocketing electricity bills that can reach $800 or even $1,000 a month for a standard single-family home during the summer. This is an unofficial tax that is not listed in any mortgage disclosure. When you combine these energy costs with property taxes and rising maintenance fees, the actual monthly cost of living in Texas has increased by 60% since 2021. This is why we are seeing a mass exodus from the brand-new suburbs of North Austin and suburban Dallas. People are realizing that the cost of freedom from income tax is a massive, unpredictable surge in the cost of basic survival. As the Texas domino falls, it hits the state of Arizona, where the crisis is not fiscal, but existential. For 50 years, Phoenix grew as if it were not located in one of the most arid deserts on Earth. The growth was supported by the Colorado River and ancient groundwater. But in 2025 and early 2026, the federal government and state water authorities were forced to admit the truth. The water is running out. In several high-growth suburbs surrounding Phoenix, state officials have taken the unprecedented step of pausing new building permits. They can no longer guarantee that a new home will have a reliable source of water for the next 100 years. This has created a two-tier housing market, those with secured water rights and those without. If you own a home in a Tier 2 water zone, your equity has essentially vanished overnight. No bank will issue a 30-year mortgage on a property that might not have a functioning tap in 10 years. This is the ultimate domino, the physical unviability of the land itself. We are seeing the emergence of dry lot neighborhoods where the cost to truck in water has made the homes unmarketable to anyone but cash-buying speculators. Consider the psychological impact on a community when a water moratorium is announced. It is a death sentence for local commerce. Retailers stop moving in, schools stop expanding, and the vibrant, growing community suddenly feels like a ghost town in waiting. In 2026, we are documenting the first wave of water refugees leaving the suburbs of Phoenix and moving toward the Midwest. This is a reverse migration that nobody predicted 10 years ago. The investment thesis for the desert was built on the idea that engineering could solve any problem. But engineering requires energy and money, and right now, the cost of both is too high to save every neighborhood. The third domino is the invisible glue that holds the entire housing market together: the insurance industry. This is the domino that connects every state in the union. Insurance companies are not local businesses. They are global financial institutions that manage risk across millions of properties. When a company like State Farm or Allstate loses $5 billion in a single hurricane season in Florida, they do not just raise rates in Florida. They reassess their entire national portfolio. In 2026, we are seeing a phenomenon called insurance desertification. This is when private insurers simply stop writing new policies in entire regions. Without insurance, you cannot get a mortgage. Without a mortgage, the only buyers left are institutional investors and cash buyers, who demand a massive discount. This creates a death spiral for home values. In parts of California, Texas, and Louisiana, we are seeing insurance premiums that now exceed the cost of the mortgage principal and interest combined. This is the point where a house stops being an asset and starts being a liability. The fourth domino is the collapse of institutional confidence and the rise of the exit strategy. Between 2020 and 2023, Wall Street firms like Blackstone and Invitation Homes spent billions of dollars buying up single-family homes across the Sun Belt. They used artificial intelligence to identify the best markets and bought thousands of properties at a time, often outbidding local families. But those algorithms failed to account for the exponential rise in maintenance costs and the volatility of local infrastructure. In 2026, these institutional landlords are starting to retreat. When a firm that owns 10,000 homes in a single state decides to liquidate 10% of its holdings, it creates a massive supply shock. This institutional exit is putting downward pressure on prices at the exact moment that individual homeowners are trying to sell. You are no longer competing with the family down the street. You are competing with a billion-dollar fund that is willing to take a loss just to get the risk off its books. we must also look at the role of the commercial real estate domino. In every major city in the Sun Belt, the commercial sector is in a state of paralysis. Office buildings that were valued at $200 million in 2090 are now being sold for $80 million or less. This massive loss in commercial value creates a crater in the municipal tax base. To make up for the loss, cities have no choice but to raise residential property taxes even further. This is the silent killer of suburban equity. Your home value may be flat, but your tax bill is rising because the skyscraper downtown is empty. This is the tax contagion that is moving from the commercial sector into your living room. The fifth domino is the municipal budget crisis and the failure of infrastructure. Most people do not realize how much their local city services depend on a booming housing market. Cities in the Sun Belt use the fees from new construction to pay for their police, their firefighters, and their roads. When the building permits stop because of water issues in Arizona or insurance issues in Florida, the city's revenue disappears. To fill the hole, the city is forced to raise taxes on the existing homeowners, which further decreases the affordability of the homes, which leads to more people selling, which further decreases the tax base. This is the doom loop of urban planning. In 2026, we are seeing several once booming cities in the Sun Belt facing credit downgrades from major rating agencies. When a city's credit is downgraded, it costs more for them to borrow money to fix their pipes and roads, which accelerates the decay of the very infrastructure that the housing market depends on. Think about the quality of the roads you drive on every day. In many fast-growing suburbs, the asphalt was laid quickly and cheaply during the boom years. Now, under the extreme heat of 2026, those roads are failing. The cost to repave them has tripled due to the price of oil-based materials. Local governments are now deferring maintenance, leading to a visible decline in neighborhood quality. This urban decay is a powerful psychological domino. When a potential buyer sees potholes, overgrown medians, and failing streetlights, they see a neighborhood in decline. They offer less money, and the downward spiral accelerates. The sixth domino is the infrastructure deficit and the physical degradation of modern homes. Many of the houses built during the frenzy of 2021 and 2022 were constructed with inferior materials and rushed labor. We are now seeing a warranty crisis as these homes reach their 5-year mark. Foundations are cracking, roofs are leaking, and HVAC systems are failing prematurely. For a homeowner who is already stretched thin by high interest rates and taxes, a $20,000 foundation repair is the final straw. These build-to-rent and quickly built communities are becoming the slums of the future, as owners cannot afford the upkeep required to maintain their value. This is a structural domino that will haunt the housing market for decades. The seventh domino is the psychological shift of the American buyer and the death of FOMO, or the fear of missing out. For 2 generations, the American consumer was taught that real estate only goes up. Even after the crash of 2008, the recovery was so strong that it reinforced the belief that buying a house is the safest way to build wealth. But in 2026, that belief is shattering. For the first time in decades, the majority of Americans in a recent survey said they believe renting is a better financial move than buying. This shift in sentiment is the most dangerous domino of all because the housing market is built on the collective belief in its future value. When that belief disappears, the market loses its liquidity. We are moving into a period where homes in high-risk zones will be viewed not as investments, but as consumption goods, things you use and expect to lose value over time, like a car or a boat. The eighth domino is the impact of the global supply chain on the cost of living. In 2026, we are seeing a massive increase in the cost of everything required to maintain a home. Copper, lumber, and specialized electronic components for smart homes have all reached new price peaks. This means that a minor repair today costs what a major renovation cost 10 years ago. For a retiree on a fixed income, this is an impossible math problem. They are forced to let their properties deteriorate, which eventually lowers the value of every other house on the block. This is the contagion of neglect that is spreading through the older suburbs of the Sun Belt. The ninth domino is the role of the federal government and the looming end of subsidies. For years, the federal government has subsidized the risk of living in dangerous areas through the National Flood Insurance Program and other disaster relief efforts. But in 2026, the federal budget is under extreme pressure. There is a growing movement in Congress to stop subsidizing people who choose to build in flood zones or fire-prone forests. If the federal government pulls back its support, the insurance market will truly reach its breaking point. We will see managed retreat policies where the government offers to buy out homeowners for pennies on the dollar just to get them to move to safer ground. This is the ultimate loss of equity. As we look toward the end of this decade, from 2027 to 2030, the effect domino will create a massive geographic reorganization of the United States. We will see a managed retreat from the most vulnerable coastal and desert areas. This will not be a sudden exodus. It is a slow, painful grind. It will be the sound of thousands of people realizing at the same time that they cannot sell their homes for what they paid. It will be the sound of insurance companies sending out non-renewal notices by the millions. But in every crisis, there is an opportunity for those who have the data and the courage to act. While the Sun Belt faces its reckoning, other parts of the country are quietly preparing for a resurgence. The Rust Belt, states around the Great Lakes, once forgotten by the tech-driven economy, are now being looked at as the ultimate safe havens. They have the world's largest supply of fresh water, a stable power grid, and a climate that is becoming more temperate. In 2026, smart capital is already moving toward the Great Lakes and the northern Appalachian regions. Investors are buying property in places like Columbus, Ohio, Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Buffalo, New York. These are cities with established infrastructure, low natural disaster risk, and affordable housing stock that is actually built to last. This is the great rebalancing. The wealth that was created in the Sun Belt over the last 20 years is being liquidated and moved to the resilience zones of the North. This is the final stage of the domino effect, the birth of the new American economy based on sustainability rather than speculation. Let us discuss the concept of climate-proof investments. In 2026, a new class of real estate appraisal is emerging. It is no longer just about square footage and granite countertops. It is about the elevation of the property, the source of its water, the proximity to a stable power substation, and the historical insurance loss data of the zip code. The houses that hold their value in the next 10 years will be the ones that are boring. Homes in stable, inland areas with old-fashioned, reliable infrastructure. The exciting homes with ocean views or desert vistas are becoming the subprime assets of the 2020s. If you are a homeowner in a high-risk domino state, you have a difficult choice to make. You can stay and hope that technology or government subsidies will save the day, or you can recognize the math for what it is and make your exit while there is still liquidity in the market. The most expensive mistake you can make is waiting for the evening news to tell you that the market has crashed. By the time it is on the news, the dominoes have already fallen. You need to be looking at the aquifer data, the insurance premium trends, and the municipal budget reports today. As we enter a decade where housing intel will be the difference between a comfortable retirement and financial ruin, the rules of the game have changed. The geography of risk has changed, and the cost of being wrong has never been higher. At Housing Intel, our mission is to provide you with the data-driven analysis that the real estate industry is too afraid to publish. we are not here to sell you a dream. We are here to help you survive the reality. We are documenting a historic transition in the American way of life. The age of unbridled expansion is over. The age of the resilience reckoning is here. Consider the impact of the remote work domino as it reaches its final phase. In 2024, many companies began mandating a return to the office. For those who bought homes in Zoom towns in the middle of nowhere, the value of their property was tied to the flexibility of their employer. As that flexibility vanishes, a wave of forced selling is hitting the rural and exurban markets. This is another domino in the chain. People who bought at the top of the market in remote areas now finding they have to sell at a loss to move back to the city for work. Finally, we must talk about the 10th domino, the generational transfer of wealth. As the baby boomer generation enters its 80s, trillions of dollars in real estate assets will be passed down to their children. But those children often do not want the massive, high-maintenance homes in Florida or Arizona. They want smaller, more sustainable homes in walkable urban centers. This generational dump of Sunbelt real estate will create a permanent oversupply in the very markets that are already struggling with environmental and fiscal issues. The great inheritance may actually be a great burden for many families. As we move forward into 2026 and beyond, we will continue to track every falling domino, from the coastal condos of Florida to the dry lots of Arizona and the tax-burdened suburbs of Texas. We will show you exactly where the smart money is moving and how to protect your family's future in an era of unprecedented volatility. The era of the Sunbelt miracle is over. The era of the resilience reckoning has begun. Thank you for your time, and thank you for trusting us to be your guide through this historic transformation of the American housing market. Make sure you are subscribed and that your notifications are turned on, because the next domino is already starting to lean, and you do not want to be standing under it when it falls. We will see you in the next deep dive into the truth behind the numbers.